A lot of esports monitors are kind of stuck in the past. That's why Sony sponsored this video so we could unbox their M10S, a 480 Hz, 27-inch, 1440p OLED gaming monitor that has a bunch of cool pro features and can shrink down to a nice 24.5-inch size for those of you major CS2 or Valorant players. Let's see what's in the box. We've got part of the stand, something I'm actually really keen on. They partnered with Fnatic to try to make something that's just perfect for esports. We'll see why later, but it's really small and they have a really thin base so you can put a keyboard on it. Here's the other part, the big column. Column also has, oh, it's so hard when there's no weight on it, but it's also got measurements. So you can actually tick off where exactly you like. All right, let's find our actual panel here. We've got a really small cable here for power, so no C13, that's what, a C7 or a C8. We've also got a DisplayPort cable. One cool feature is that it is DisplayPort 2.1. It's only UHBR10. I would love to see full fat bitrate, but you know what? The reality is DSC is pretty good, so it should be fine for the vast majority of you. Here's the other half of our power. Nice big power brick, so it's not staying in the monitor. And then finally, we've got a handy dandy setup guide. Shows that you can route some cables through the stand. That's nice. And it looks like a color accuracy report. Looks relatively good. We'll get into more of what our results are. There's actually, they just have a gamma curve and a grayscale tracking. So I would have liked to see some kind of Delta E 2000 color accuracy report, but whatever. We tested it ourselves. We'll talk about that later. Ah, here we go. Oh, it's so thin. Let's get our cover off. You can see here why the stand is actually so cool. Look how thin that is. You can put a keyboard on that, no problem. You can get right up close. It's got tons of maneuverability. It's actually got 360-degree swivel. Wow, I think that's one of the first times I've ever seen a full 360 swivel that isn't like kind of truncated in the way that it'll go like this, and then it'll go like that, but it's kind of stuck somewhere. This is a full, you can spin that all the way around. You spin me right around, baby. The only thing is, it can't pivot. Don't get me wrong, it's a 480 Hertz gaming monitor. You're not gonna wanna pivot it into portrait mode 99 times out of 100. But what if 5 years from now, you're still using it and something even crazier? We got 1,000 Hertz monitors now. You wanna turn this into like a little side portrait monitor? That's not an option. Instead, you're gonna have to sell it, get something else, because it's just not gonna pivot for you. Look at how thin that panel is. And then the box with all of the electronics, controls and stuff, it's actually pretty nice. They've also got a multi-layer thermal cooling solution. This thing can do 1,300 nits, and it should keep it nice and cool. And one thing I forgot to mention is the level of tilt. It's actually not bad. Surprising amount of tilt up if you really wanted to. I typically just kind of keep mine basically flat or maybe tilted down if they're a little higher up. I'm also surprised, I thought for sure, just based on pictures, that this would be either like really back or front heavy. But it's pretty solid, honestly. I don't think anyone's gonna like knock this over. As for buttons and whatnot, we've got a nice power button, dedicated power button. And then what appears to be, yep, navigation nipple or nubbin on the back. This is actually probably my favorite combination. I don't like when the navigation nipple's also the power button. As for I/O, we've got a 3.5mm headphone jack, a couple of USB-A ports, USB-B, 2 HDMI inputs, 1 display port, and then we've got our power and an extra USB-A that I actually like how they've labeled this. It is specifically for updates. So the whole shell looks pretty good, but how does it look turned on? Let's fire it up and take a look. We've got it all fired up, looks pretty good. Let's make sure it's actually set to what we want it to. 479.99, baby. 10-bit color. Oh, I don't want 10-bit, I'm in SDR. I want to change this to HDR. Because with the beauty of OLED is that it looks incredible in HDR. Windows, not so much, but as soon as we put content on, I promise it'll actually look really good. Yeah, there we go. 10-bit baby. 27 inches is pretty typical for most of you. It feels a little bit small to me now. I'm used to a 32-inch. So, you know, we're gaming though. We're competitively gaming. Let's get this in here. Oh yeah, and then check this out. Keyboard fits right over top. Let's play some CS2. The nice thing about 1440p at 27 inches is that you've got a pretty good pixel density. It's about 110 ppi. And this thing, I'm not in it yet, but it should be able to go to a cool 24.5-inch mode. So even though I'm this close now, that's too much. But when it's down to this, that should be like actually pretty okay. So let's set it to our 24.5-inch. Oh, center or bottom, that's cool. So you can have it Well, let's see what center looks like, but it's probably right in the middle. This is way better. I highly recommend changing the size of the screen outside of game. Don't do it mid because you're gonna end up with some really weird issues. But this honestly looks pretty cool. It's pretty good. You got some black bars, you can put it centered if you wanted to, but I'm pretty happy with it overall. And I'm happy with how good the screen looks because it's a 480 hertz OLED display. So we're talking about lightning fast pixel response times. I think they advertise something like 0.03 millisecond gray to gray. You've got 480 hertz, so everything is going to be fed to you at a very quick rate, to the point where like clarity, motion clarity, especially along with those near instant pixel response times, it's just perfect. Like you flick your mouse and your screen just looks great. It's also got G-Sync if you want to. I think that, you know, when you're rocking a 480 hertz monitor at this price point, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you're probably gonna be using a pretty big graphics card alongside it. And I don't know how much you're really gonna need adaptive sync because you're not really gonna be in the like 60 to even 120 hertz or 120 FPS range most of the time. I think it's totally fine. One thing that's really cool though, if you, for some reason, maybe it's the contrast and you just want to boost everything, you love the look of a TN panel, you can turn on FPS Pro Mode, which lets you practice on a simulated LCD before you get wrecked in the next CS2 tournament. Everything's just kind of boosted. There's not a lot of contrast. If you're playing FPSs and you want to see in every dark shadowed area, this is probably the mode for you. I don't think it looks the best, but I love a lot of contrast. It's an OLED panel. It should be able to do like 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio with those perfectly deep blacks, especially with a 1300 nits peak brightness rating. That's strong. Let's try FPS Pro Plus. This mode should highlight enemies or outline them. Okay, we're playing Halo now where enemies actually have outlines to them, unlike Counter-Strike, and we've got the FPS Pro Plus mode turned on. And I've got to say, it's very noticeable how outlined they are. And from a competitive standpoint, okay, sure, I get it. That's gonna give you an edge. But just from a visual standpoint, I'm not a huge fan, but I love immersion. I'm not trying to win every time. Whereas like, but if that's what you want, it's gonna help you do that.
This man can't hit a single shot.
No, I hit him a bunch of times there. What are you talking about?
Sure.
As for just gaming on this monitor, it looks really good. I don't know how else to say it. When you finally get to try OLED with a high refresh rate and HDR content, it just looks incredible. You have such massive contrast. Your scenes look perfectly highlighted where every pixel is a dimming zone. It's nice and sharp thanks to the decently high PPI for 1440p at 27 inches. And 480 hertz, there's not much that's faster than that. There's a couple monitors at 500 and maybe 540 if you overclock them, and that's about it right now. So okay, the gaming looks great, but what if you're using this for more than just esports? Let's check out HDR footage. If you do happen to buy this as an esports monitor, there's a huge plus in that being a nice new OLED display with micro lens array plus, the HDR experience for whether you're watching YouTube with HDR or movies, or honestly, most modern AAA games, it's gonna be really good. It just looks so crystal clear. It looks very color accurate, which we'll touch on in a bit here. And it's just a fantastic experience. I feel like a lot of people try HDR with a bad monitor and they don't really get it. They're like, it looks like weird or bright or whatever, not in a good way. You've really got to try it on either a high-end mini LED with a ton of zones or OLED. And that's when you'll get that real experience and you'll kind of just click with HDR. Once you actually experience really good HDR, I find it hard to go back. One great feature that they've got is their Inzone Hub, and it's pretty good. We've got our display settings, display HDR, cinema, game, check your brightness stabilizer, you know, change brightness and contrast, everything through nice little sliders. Okay, setting could not be changed. That's because it's HDR. You can't usually mess with contrast in HDR. That's fine, those are usually set to pretty rigid standards anyway, but if you're in SDR, you can do just about whatever you want. Change the gamma curve, crank the sharpness down. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. Brightness, right here, boom. It takes a second to like think about it and make the changes, but it does. The OSD itself, with a navigation nipple, is perfectly serviceable. For whatever reason, say your computer isn't running and you want to change modes on the OSD, that's totally fine. Pretty simple system, you know, you just have a list and then you go over and make a selection. They have a lot of options for you. In terms of testing results, it ended up being pretty good and essentially hit all of what they actually state on the box. We got about 1296 nits of max brightness, which is basically right on the money for their 1300 nits claim. As for color accuracy in SDR mode, we measured a very impressive Delta E 2000 average of 0.64 with a max of just 1.27. As for HDR HLG, our best measurements were done in cinema mode, where we measured an average Delta E ITP of just 11.24 with a max of 27.74. That's pretty good for Delta E ITP. Finally, as for latency, it's great. It's an OLED, it's 480 Hertz. We're measuring just a bit over the theoretical perfect, and then when it comes to end, it's barely adding anything. So you're just gonna have a really solid gaming experience, and there's no way you're gonna feel any kind of lag or latency when you're trying to interface with this display. The real question is, how much does it cost? Well, it's not cheap. It's $1,100. However, if you basically want the best of the best, plus all of these super cool pro features and this really sleek stand that can do a 360-degree swivel that I haven't seen on like any other high-end display, at least nothing recent, this is kind of it. And if you're willing to pay for it, I think it's a pretty solid buy. Thanks so much to Sony for sponsoring this video. If you want to check out a video with another product of theirs, we've got the M9 that we looked at last year. And if you want this guy, you can pick it up at the link in the description below.